I'll tell you what we're doing today. I told you we're in the middle of a series. It's called Beyond Us. And really the tagline of this is, right, faith that goes further. And so I would say this over the next few minutes. If you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, what we're going to talk about, I think principally certainly still applies to you. But I would say you'll probably find like midway through, you're going, hey, like there's more to it than kind of what I would say, like you feel like maybe you could take that step. And so I would love for you even just to dive into this story on your own at some point because it is a fascinating account of a group of people who were attempting to follow God and continue to like sort of fall off the horse and try to figure out how they navigate this. And it's a section of the Old Testament that's both like history based and also like you see the beyond natural stuff that's going on in it. But if you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, I would say like what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, how do I say this well? It's something that is not always a felt need. And so as the guy that's going to talk for the next few minutes, I would say, what I wish I could do is deconstruct for a little bit what you see about yourself and where you hope to be. And so if you're here, and again, you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time, it can be very easy over time to become numb to some of the things that we're talking about. But what we're going to do for the next few minutes is hopefully disrupt quite a bit of that and sort of take a deep dive in it. So I'm going to get you all caught up. So last week we talked about a group of people called the Israelites, and we said when it comes to us, sort of the foundational part of the series was this. So the difference between a person with faith and a person who needs faith isn't what they see, but often it's how they see it, right? So you could look at the same set of facts, you could look at all of those things, and then at the same time as somebody else see something vastly different. I put in my notes, I said faith and fear often see the same facts, but they envision very different futures. And I would say this, I grew up around sometimes people who would say just don't be afraid or don't have fear, and I always kind of laughed like, you're on a roller coaster and somebody says don't be afraid, it just doesn't even make sense. I am afraid, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing that you can say, like all the logic in the world. The first time I got on a plane, I'll never forget, I probably shouldn't tell this whole story, but yeah, I was afraid. And I was next to a guy who was like a heavy metal rocker. We were flying out to LA and I literally just, when the plane took off, it was going slow and then it went super fast that moment. I grabbed his inner thigh for the next 4.5 minutes. We got real close and didn't talk for 4 hours on that flight. Like it was kind of, and I remember him telling me, he's like, you don't need to be afraid. And I was like, that makes no sense to me. You know, like I just am. When you are, you are. But faith and fear, you know this, there's mindsets attached to these that no matter how you look at it, right? Two people can look at the same set of facts and envision a different future based off of their story, right? And then I put in my notes, I said this, who you will become tomorrow often, and you know this, your parents told you this, who you become tomorrow depends on what you're willing to do today, especially around the things that you feel afraid of, or you feel disconnected from, or you're anxious about. And then Emily and I were talking yesterday, and she texted me a quote, completely random from this message, but I thought it was so funny and so good. She said this, she says, when you're born, right? When you're born, you look like your parents, but when you die, you look like your decisions. And I kind of laughed going like, that's true of 37-year-old me too. Some of y'all are like, that's a McDonald's decision. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit, like you get it. Like some of y'all are like, you do that a lot. Anyway, like you get it. Like you look like your decisions the older that you get. And this is a fascinating thing. When it comes to your faith in particular, like it is taking you in a direction. Or your fear is taking you in a direction. Or if you're here and you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time, but you become numb to it, that's taking you in a direction, right? The way that your faith expands or feels like it contracts with your story and your own unique set of circumstances of pain, that's taking you in a direction. And so what we're gonna do for the next few minutes is, again, kind of pick up where we left off with the Israelites. What we said last week was this group of people called the Israelites, God had made a promise to. And not only did he make a promise, but he showed that he was going to be good on his promise based off of many of the supernatural things that he had already done, right? And so I put it here, I said, God had already shown himself to be powerful on their behalf. And I won't read through all these, but then last week, these are all the things that have been leading up to what we talked about last week. All the things that God did on their behalf to move them forward into this area that, we refer to as the promised land. I needed all these miraculous things. And so they get to the edge of the promised land and they send in 12 spies to go look at it. Now, what's fascinating about this moment, as best you can picture it, this is where we talked about last week, is they get to the edge, they go, we need to go in and see it. But the mission that they were sending these 12 spies in to look at, I put it in my notes this way, is I said this, the goal wasn't to decide whether they should go into the area that God had promised them. It was to discover how good God's promise really was. And it's a very different sort of mindset. It wasn't to go in and say, can we pull this off? It was to go in and see just how good God's promise already was. And the land was already given. The scouting trip was meant to inspire faith, not to incite fear. And again, I'll put this up here. What this was really about was a promised land that God had given this group of people and said, this is going to be yours. And it's going to be yours. I've done all of these things to lead you up to this place, all of these ways to show you that my character is good, all of these things to show you how powerful I am. You can trust me. And so they send 12 spies in. And we'll kind of go through these almost this chapter. So he sends 12 spies in, and then all 12 of them come back. And 2 of the 12, which would be Caleb and Joshua, Caleb and Joshua go, hey, God's given us this. Here's all of the positive things about it. And the other 10 start talking about this. Like there's the grapes, which is kind of like this reference point of all the good things that are there. There's all the food you can imagine. And it's all the ways that God promised it would be. The only problem is there were giants there, right? There are people that we could never conquer on our own. There are people that we could never overcome. There's no way we could do that. And because of what the other 10 saw, that's the narrative that got spread all throughout this group of people called the Israelites. And what happened is it led them to a place of fear and rebellion into what God had called them to do. And so the part of the story where we sort of left off last week was this, that the Israelites then would go into the wilderness from this point on for 40 years. And so what God did, and again, this is one of the kind of tensions of the text, especially when you're reading it from 2025 backwards, as you go, like, you don't see God often talked about in our culture where he says, look, it's not going to be this, but because of your decision, you get to experience this. You don't see like the discipline side of God taught about, but what happens is it spreads throughout. They wanted to go back to where they came from in slavery. And God goes, look, nope, we're going to pause this. And for 40 years, they did not inherit what God gave them. And we said this principally for us, and this is sort of where we left off. We said this, that for us, even though our circumstances are different, our approach is different, all those sorts of things, and we have to ask ourselves or commit to, like, I'm going to see whatever circumstances I'm in through the eyes of faith, and then I'll remain faithful. That whatever I'm walking through, I get to choose the mindset to see it through the eyes of faith. And in the midst of that, I'm going to remain faithful with my life and trust him. Right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to pick up today, and we're going to look at like 7 or 8 verses in an area of the Bible called Joshua, which sort of is sort of like a historical account of the next leader of all these things. And so 40 years in the wilderness, they go and they do these things. The promised land still exists, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do next and how they're going to navigate it. And what happens in the midst of this is a transition of leadership and a transition of power. And the person who's going to come into power was one of the 2 spies who saw it through this like positive lens, and that's Joshua. And the question that they sort of come back with on the other side of it is this, that God made a promise, and the question that he at some point has to wrestle through is like, is this promise still possible for these people? And this is the sort of deeper question that he would have to wrestle with. And is it possible through me, right? Is it possible through me? Is it possible that the God of the universe might choose me to lead this group of people in to what's next? We're going to pick up at Joshua chapter 1, verse 1. We're going to pick up right after Moses has died, who was leading them before. Here's what it says, Joshua 1, verse 1. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, and again, I want you to like, as much as I could take you here and put you in the text, this is what I want to do. He said, Moses, my servant, he's dead. The person who had led you to this point, got you all here, he's dead. He's no longer leading this thing. And then he goes on and he says this. He says, now then, you and all these people, you need to get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land that I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites. And this is the part, again, interacting with God, whatever that looks like here for Joshua. You talk about that all day, but he gets this nudge, this urge, this conversation with God where God's going, look, Moses is dead. You're about to lead, and then get ready, which is fascinating to me. Like, this is one of the most like fascinating parts of Scripture, where you go like, Joshua is told by God that his role now is to prepare not just all these people, but to prepare himself to be the one to lead these people into the next thing. And in verse 3, it says this. He makes a promise to him. He says, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Now, again, this is always fascinating. I think this is an interesting sort of part of it in the text and the way that it's written. The idea here is that God is going to give him what he promised as he is on the move, taking those steps that God is guiding him towards, right? It's kind of almost like, you ever seen one of these things? My kids went to, it's like Scene, and there's a number. What's that? Scene? Yeah, I just pick a number. I was going to say 53, but that's great. Scene 75. And they have this like big LED board thing. And have you seen this? Like when you take a step, it lights up on the bottom, which I just think is the coolest thing. So I watched them do it. I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. Then I did. And so it's almost like this like weird kind of version. Wherever you step, it lights up. And that's the image that I get here. It's like really God's promised the whole of it. But there's an action for Joshua to take, and every single step of obedience is when he's going to reveal it, right? This is the progress part. Progress that comes through his obedience to what God is doing and where God is leading, right? And then in verse 4, God paints a picture, and again, as you read back through the Bible, it's so easy to read this and I think go, oh, that's so great, because you don't think about it. I don't think about it like this. Most of us aren't versed in, ancient Near East culture and land. But here's what it says. It says, your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. Now again, I don't know how to paint this picture for you better, but just imagine this. Imagine the God of the universe looks at you and is like, hey, I'm giving you this land. And you get Dublin, and you're like, great, awesome, that's so great. And then you get Plain City, you're like, even better, dear Dutchman. You get that, the donuts. And you're like, then we're going to keep expanding. And then you get like Worthington, and you get Columbus, and you just keep going, and then it continues to expand. And then we're going to go like in Illinois, and you're like, I don't know about that. And he goes, even Michigan? He goes, no, not that. That's great. I think I'm good. Like, we'll take Traverse City, but outside of that, like, I don't know, right? Like, just keep going, and then it just expands. Like, you get this state, you get this state, you get all of this area, all of this. And here's the funny part. How would you feel in that moment? You'd sit there and you go, oh, that's great. I think I can do that. Yeah. Oh, that's bigger. Okay. Yeah, it's even bigger. Yeah. And then by the end of it, you're just like, I think I'm good. I feel pretty good. Like, you get a little anxious about it. You're like, I don't know. Like, that's a lot. And he goes, the promised land that you're going to get is going to expand and grow so far beyond you. And then he makes another promise, and he says this. He says, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And then this is the part that, again, is fascinating. It's the promise that you want from God, and it's also one of the most difficult things to hear. It says, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. And so before you get sort of the pinnacle part of the verse, or this passage, you get God's promise of his presence, his power, and his progress through his obedience. And then he goes, with all of these things that I've said, you get one of the most famous parts, the Old Testament. In fact, your grandmother might have had this plastered somewhere. You graduated from high school and they wrote it in a Bible for you. Or many of you, when you went on your first date, your parents should have given you this. You know what I mean? Some version of this. It says this, be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. Now again, you rewind for a second. You go, God goes, I'm going to give you this area, and then this area, and this area, and this area. You get all the things that I promised, and it's so far beyond you. And I promise you, I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. And here's the honest truth, right? Here's the honest truth. All of that may feel reassuring to the person who doesn't have to lead it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll give you an example. How many, you been to Disney? Y'all been to Disney? We did this ride, what's the Slinky Dog? Is that what it is? The Toy Story thing? And when Henry was really, really young, I looked at him, and I was logically telling him, this is gonna be a great thing. You're gonna have so much fun. You are 2 inches taller than you need to be to ride this ride. That was a mistake. Anyway, so there's that. It's gonna be so much fun. And I'm convincing him, and the whole way through, he's like trying to muster it up. I'm like, Dad's gonna be with you when we get on this thing. And he's like, yeah. And he's like nervous all the time. And then we get on it, you know this. And there's all these like hills, it's super fun. I had the time of my life. Now, if I'd have done like the bigger ones, Absolutely not. But I had a time in my life, I was Lincoln Dog. And I look over, and the whole time, I'm like, he's going to crap himself. Like, there's a little bit of this, like, he's holding on tighter than anything I've ever seen, scared to death. And here's what you know, here's what I know. My presence was good. It did not take away the fear. It didn't take away the fear. All of the good things, all the ways that I've taken care of him, all of those things are good. But in the moment when fear came, fear seemed to override all of the things and all of my promises and the fact that I'm 4 feet taller than him at this moment. I don't know, like all of these things. Because when it happens, and you carry a responsibility that's heavier than you think that you can handle. And so God says, here's the promises, all the things that I've done. I'll be with you like I was with Moses. Here's all the land that I'm going to give you. And then his next response is an action step around the mindset of this leader to choose strength and choose courage in the midst of it. Be strong and courageous because you will inherit, or you will lead these people. Sorry, you're going to go back. Sorry about that, Grant. Yeah, you will lead these people to inherit the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. One more insight about this, and then we'll keep going. Inheriting something is very different than earning something. So even in this, he goes, I've made all these promises. I'm going to be with you, and you're going to inherit it. And also, your job is to choose strength and courage in the midst of it. And then in verse 7, he reiterates it. He says this, be strong, right? And then he says, and very courageous, which is what you say to somebody who probably is standing there going, this feels like a lot. Very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law that my servant Moses gave to you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be, and again, here's another promise, successful in wherever you go. If you will obey me, if you will follow me, if you will trust me, and if you will exhibit strength and courage, you will be successful where you go. Now, here's kind of the fundamental thing, and this is how it applies to us. I think this is so important for those of us who are followers of Jesus. And if you're not, I think the principle is still true. It's probably a little bit disconnected from what we would say. And that's this. For Joshua, this wasn't simply stepping into new territory. It was stepping into a new mindset of leadership and who he was going to be. And this is where I would say this. Most of you in the room, if I'm really honest, you live a good life, you live pretty comfortable, you're doing well. Like you did a good job, right? But there is something just on the edge of your comfortability. There's something on the edge of the things that you've done that require a little bit more faith than you currently have or that you're exhibiting. And there's something for most people that God is nudging you to do. And I would say this. And usually for a lot of people, fear and faith find a conflict, and then your logic pulls you back from taking whatever that step of faith is. And here's the mindset that I wish I could change in you, is whenever you want to take a step further into what God has called you to do, like for real, it will require courage and strength to take whatever that step is. Then in verse 8, it goes on and it says this. It says, keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Meaning this, all of the things that I've done, all of the things that I've said, bring those things to these moments so that you can build your trust in me and do what I've called you to do so that you can stand strong and courageous. And then he says this, which is like this fascinating imperative in the text. It says this in verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Now, this is what I would say, like, the beauty of this text is this. He's seen God's faithfulness. He's seen people's rebellion. He's seen God's correction. And now he stands in a moment where God says, now you are going to lead. And he breathes in him a command that is an action for him to take when it comes to courage and when it comes to his strength. Can I tell you something? We're not taught, I don't think, that courage is something that you decide. Most of us are taught that courage is something that you muster up or just have, almost like an emotion. But the truth is this, that courage is the currency of every faith-filled transition that you're going to find yourself in when it comes to your life. And I'll say this, if you don't choose it, you could, and nobody likes to say this out loud, you could miss, I think, what God's best for you is in that season. And here's what you also know is true, especially if you're a parent. You know that's true because you teach your kids that. You teach your kids that when they're in high school and they're dating somebody. You're like, look, I think God has a great plan for your life. It's not him. Whatever that is. You figured out how to say, you believe this for your kid. You teach your kids this when it comes to their friends, that God has a great plan for your life. And the friends that you choose, it has such a determining factor in where you end up. Be wise about it. You know this, your kids did whatever, sports they did or whatever. They were nervous before they did it. You had a conversation like, look, you've got to choose courage and just get out there and get in the game. You got to go do that thing. And if you don't, come on, you'll miss it. And the older that we get, oftentimes, the less we acknowledge that we could miss God's best for our life simply because we didn't stand in strength and courage. And courage is not like this. It's not how it's portrayed in the movies. It's not how it's portrayed to many of us. I put in my notes, I said, courage is awfully painful for most of us. Most of us get an image like this, where it's like Mel Gibson and Braveheart. Do we have any Braveheart fans in the room? He's on the horse, and he does the whole speech, and everybody's like, yeah, whatever. He's got paint all over his face. I think for me, at least, most of my courage moments felt a little bit more like this. You know what I mean? Like a little bit more like Ben Affleck having a day. You know what I'm saying? Like, am I right though? Like, come on, you know this, that your courage more times than not, it doesn't feel like everyone's cheering you on. There's no backing track to those moments for you. There's not a part of you that just goes, and it was easy. On the other side of it, you're glad you did, but in the midst of it, it's pretty accurate. You know what I'm saying? But it is very necessary for you to move through whatever transition God is calling you to make in your life. So here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to wrap up this talk. We're going to move further through it next week. But I'll say this. I usually try to give you action steps. But I want to poke at, in the middle of this series, like your mindsets around these things. And it's not that they're not practical, because they are. But it's how you think about these things. The first thing is this. You don't enter new territory in your life with the old mindsets that got you here. You just don't do it. You do not make progress by doing all of the same things that you've done before. Now, again, you know this. You've applied this to your business. You've applied this to your leadership. You've applied this to your relationship. You know this. It's different when you're dating. It's different when you're engaged. It's different when you're married. It's different when you're 10 years in. You know this. All of these things have transitions to them. Your friendships have it. All of this is true. When it comes to your faith, this is absolutely true. When it comes to what God has put in your heart to do and nudging you towards to take a step, this is absolutely true. You will not move forward by embracing all of the old mindsets that brought you here, right? We talk about this all the time. I think it is so important for you to look at your faith constantly and go, what else do I need to know? Or look at the text as you read the Bible and go, I thought this when I was a kid. But why do I believe this? And dive in and not just deconstruct all your faith. I get why people do that, but how do I say this well? It's important. It's just not quite the whole thing. You don't deconstruct all the stuff that you believe all at once. You deconstruct pieces of it realistically, and then have to look at that and figure out if you want to put it back in and what you're doing with it. Right? Deconstructing your faith is rarely like, well, then now I just don't like Christianity at all. A lot of people start there, but it's not that. In fact, you know it's not that for those of you who've done it, because of the nostalgia that you feel when you go back and you look at the things that you wish you believed were still true, right? Like, it's so funny. I do this with church sometimes. Like, I'll deconstruct the models of church that we were given. And then I went back to this small little church that I grew up in for a while, and they ended, I joke about this all the time, like, As the Deer. Do you remember that song, As the Deer? Is that what you do? If you don't, no worries. Just listen to it on your way home or on a date or sometime. It'd be great. All those are jokes. And I found myself doing this. I would never do it that way. But man, that was so beautiful. And I had this like deep connection to it, not because it was wrong, but because, and it's not even that I moved beyond it. It's just that I might think differently now, but man, I'm still connected to the truth of those lyrics and what happens in the moment. Come on, I grew up where people would come to an altar and there'd be like 3 pastors, and there's this weird moment where you're trying to, do I make eye contact or not? And then you don't, and you just move past them, and there's always like these moments, you know? Like, and then you go, but I found Jesus that way. And a lot of my friends did. Like, it's beautiful. You look at all of these different parts, you do this in every other part of your life. You go, I don't throw away the whole thing, but I'm pulling this part out going, and now what to do with this? All right, then you study it, and you look at it, and then you put it back. No movement in your faith happens without you going, I'm going to move beyond an old mindset and continue to grow. Second one is this. I put it in my notes to say this way. The transitional moments in your life really do require new courage. They rarely require new conditions for you. And I'm the king of this. I want the circumstances to change before I move forward in whatever those things are. And I'm just going to tell you something. The courage that it requires for you to grow does not come from new conditions. If it did, it wouldn't be courage. It doesn't come just from new conditions. It comes from you choosing to move forward in the midst of oftentimes the same conditions to disrupt what currently exists. And then the last one is this. And I say this a lot, so this isn't new if you've been to our church for a while, but I say it this way. I was like, the edges of your limitations will be, have been, will always be, right? The beginning of you experiencing his strength. You get to the limit of you, and then all of a sudden you begin to experience the strength that didn't feel like, even though it was there, it didn't feel like it was present to you when you were striving and trying to do it on your own. You discover his strength on the other side of whatever that courageous next step is when you trust him in your faith. Now, I got one more statement in here, and then we're going to wrap up with a story and then, in my time. That's this. Like when you come to the end, right? When you come to the end of what you can plan, of what you can control, what you can predict, it's at that moment I believe that for many of us, God says, like, are you ready now to follow me into even this thing? One of the best things that you could do is say, God, with courage, with strength, and open-handedness, whatever it is that you want from me, I will follow. So this is what I put in my notes at the bottom line. I'm going to pray, and then we'll get you out of here in a second. That's this. We step into what God has for us next when we act with the courage that he's given us now. So my challenge to you is this. What is God calling you to do next? And then will you choose, and it's a choice, to have courage and invite him in with strength. So here's how we're going to end our time. Ready? If you're not a follower of Jesus, I'm going to ask you to reflect for a second. You can totally do that. If you are, I'm going to ask you to pray a very simple prayer. So if you would ask you to close your eyes for a second, bow your heads. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do just for a second. That's this. I'm going to ask you to ask yourself a very simple question. That's this. Okay, what's the next transition for me? What is the next transition for me? For some of you, it's a mindset. Some of you, it's a job. For some of you, it's a family thing, a relationship thing. For some of you, I say this quite a bit. Some of you, you're a leader, but you're not leading the way that you could and should be. There is a new sort of thing that he's leading you into that. Some of you, it's starting something. It could be so many different things. Okay, what's this transition that you have for me? And then here's what I'm going to ask you to do. For many of you, like several things popped in your mind. And what you did is you went like, that's just me talking. That's just kind of a hope I have or a dream I have. I'd love for you just to take that seriously even for like 30 more seconds, right? 30 more seconds. What is that thing that just popped in your head? What are those things? Then I want you to go and really ask yourself this question. Do I believe that God is with me? And the second version of that, this is a harder one to answer, I think, is do you believe that God is already in the future that he's given you to follow? So here's the simple prayer, and this is the prayer I'm going to ask you to pray. And it says, God, would you make me ready for what's next? And would you help me to trust and follow? So Father, we thank you so much for these truths that have been preserved over thousands of years. And that in so many ways we're very different. In so many ways we're absolutely the same as many of these people. And the arc of what it looks like to trust and follow you is very similar throughout history. So, Father, I pray that every person in this room would find and choose the courage to move forward in whatever it is that you're calling them to do. That they would choose strength in those moments. And God, that you would show up tangibly on their behalf over and over and over again. God, for the people in this room that are going to be different in a month or 6 months or a year, not just because things happened to them, but because they chose to follow you. God, I pray the story they tell a year from now of your faithfulness and how you did what only you could do as they trusted you at the edge of their limitations. And God, we pray that you would help all of those things in us to not just be about us, but to be for others. And that we would give our lives away in every possible way that we could, so that more and more people could both understand what it means to follow you and can have a picture of what it looks like when deeply flawed people experience the power and the beauty of the God of the universe. God, we thank you for those things. In Jesus' name we pray.